We're back. VJRadio.com. Charlie Wardy here with you. We have possibly the greatest guest I've ever had so far, actor, writer, director, comedian, Carl Reiner. Hi, Carl.
Let me be the judge if I'm the greatest guest you ever had. Tell me who your other guests are, and I'll let you know if you're correct.
Well, let's see. A couple weeks ago, I had Alan King.
Okay. So far, you're...
So far, I'm right?
Yeah. No. I just got the Alan King Award last week for the Cultural Society in New York as a...
Right. That's what I understand.
Humor. Yeah,
I think my introduction was very funny, though.
I guess he might consider himself the best guest you ever had.
I introduced you, actor, writer, director, comedian, Carl Reiner. Like, people are going, oh, that Carl Reiner. It's like, of course, Carl Reiner. Thanks for joining me, first of all, Carl. It is definitely an honor to have you on my show.
Well, this is a first. I have never been on internet radio, or whatever we're calling this. What are we calling this?
Yeah, it is. It's internet radio. But you've been on the internet.
I don't know that I may have been on the internet with Mel Brooks. I think we did something on the internet a while ago.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But, we have a little picture of us in the corner.
Exactly.
I remember.
Yeah, right. I got to ask right off the bat, Carl Reiner, is it a lot of pressure being a genius?
Oh, are you kidding? It's tremendous pressure.
Yeah?
Tremendous pressure. I've been looking for, when they came up with, when Einstein, who now got the cover of Time magazine as the most important person of the century,
right.
When he came up with E equal MC squared,
yeah.
I worked for years. I had D equal ND3. I mean, I had so many things. I never came up with anything as good as that.
No,
It's really tough to be a genius.
I mean, do you get different insurance rates, best hotel rooms, things like that?
No. They charge you a little more if you're a genius, because they figure you're going to do something crazy and blow up something accidentally. The insurance rates are higher.
Yeah, huh? Well, then forget it. I don't want to be.
No, you don't have a choice. You are who you are.
Yeah, huh?
I mean, we geniuses are born that way. We can't do anything about it.
It's a curse, huh?
Yeah, it's a curse. Let's not throw the word genius around too much.
Okay.
There are only 4 geniuses in the world. I won't tell you who they are.
Oh, now you have me intrigued.
Einstein would have been one of them, no question about it.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, since this is internet radio from Israel, have you ever been here?
No, I haven't been to Israel, and it's one of the things in my life that I regret having not done, because a couple of times we were invited, and they always invited me at a time when I was either doing a picture or doing something, couldn't get me there. And now that we're getting older and we can't travel, we don't travel as well. It's like wine, it doesn't travel as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever get there, but everybody who's ever been there, who are friends of mine, says it's one of the great experiences for a Jew, for anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody who cares about culture and the world as it developed from there is missing something.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I did do a thing for the Weizmann Institute in New York, the scientists. I had 20 scientists on a panel, and there were 7 Nobel scientists, and I felt I was in Israel.
Yeah, that could do it.
What they were doing at the institute.
Uh-huh. But you've done extensive work for like JCCs and you. I guess you were just recently at the Jewish Book Fest in Detroit.
Yes, that was a wonderful event for me. I do a lot of Jewish things. You almost don't have to go. You have to go to Israel to see where it all started. But we got more Jews here in America. I keep going from city to city and meeting so many wonderful organizations. The Jewish National, the Federation, the Conference of Jews. I mean, it's a never-ending surprise to go to Toronto, Detroit, St. Louis, Kansas City. Mm-hmm. Well, let's see where else I was. No, of course, New York.
Yeah, from what I understand, they have a couple Jews there.
Yeah, and we're always met so warmly, and it's always the word culture runs around in the street when you're talking to Jews. There's a wonderful feeling of
what I don't understand,
learning and culture.
Is I've been told that you were recently honored by the Jewish Home for the Aging.
No, my son Rob and I are going to be doing that sometime in January.
Aren't you a little young for that?
No, no, it's not the aged, it's the aging. That's the difference. Okay. We are all aging. You can start aging at your age. How old are you?
I'm 44.
Yeah, you're aging.
Yeah.
Last year you were 43.
Faster than I even want to realize, I got to tell you. And then you just got the American Jewish Humor Award, which we just started talking about.
In New York. That was exciting. Mary Tyler Moore and Billy Persky introduced me, and Alan King was very gracious, and it was a wonderful, wonderful evening. I was again among people who I loved being among. They were so warm and friendly and nice.
That's great.
I must have done something right.
Yeah, well, at least something anyway. Did you grow up in a Jewish house? I mean,
Did I grow up
in an observant Jewish house, or was it particularly?
I grew up in an observant Jewish neighborhood.
Yeah.
My father, my house wasn't very observant. I did get bar mitzvah on a bootleg bar mitzvah.
Uh-huh.
By bootleg, I say that I studied for 6 months and learned it by rote. And on a Thursday morning, 3 blocks from the house, and a shul, and there's, almost a storefront shul. At Mincha, I was the morning prayers. I got bar mitzvah. I don't know, special dispensation. There were 10 Jews, my father, mother, and my brother.
Oh yeah.
That was my bar mitzvah. But I had a lot of religious Orthodox friends. Not Orthodox in the sense that they did not ride on Shabbos and they didn't ring a doorbell on Shabbos. But my father wasn't that. He believed in God, but he didn't go to shul.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know why. He never explained it to me. But on the high holidays, I went to shul with my friends because my friends were all from a religious family. So I spent my time at the Hughes Avenue Shul in the Bronx. Small shul, and I had to explain that my father went to another shul. That's why he wasn't there. He went to the Talmud Torah on Fordham Road or something. I made up something. I was lying.
Yeah.
Because I was embarrassed that my friends were, where's your father? My father doesn't go to shul.
Now,
my father was an inventor. He spent most of his time in the house inventing things.
Really? Well, he was a watchmaker, right?
He was a watchmaker. And as a matter of fact, if you have a clock in your house that runs on a battery, that's because my father invented the battery clock. That's what he was doing instead of going to shul.
Time well spent?
Yes, I think so. He was a dear man, and he gave me a lot of... He was a very ethical man, and I think I got a lot of my... 2 things I got from him. The work ethic, because he worked in the house, and I saw him working all his life in the living room, dining room. We had 3 rooms. His work ethic and his honesty. He was in one sense, he was honest. He would never say no to people. That was dishonest. He felt like saying no, but he always said yes to people.
Yeah.
And he'd hide from people who were going to ask him a question that he'd have to say no to.
That's
he wouldn't
funny.
be around to say no. I remember him saying, "You've got to be honest. You cannot steal. You cannot lie." And I remember the one example. I said, "Suppose I found a nickel in a." This was really crazy. There used to be a payphone in our hall in the Bronx apartment. There was nobody had phones in their apartments, but downstairs in the hall there was a payphone. I suppose you found the nickel in the bottom of the payphone. Should you keep it? Could you keep that? He says, no, it's probably somebody's nickel when it came through. Of course, I used to feel all the time for that. If there was a nickel, I would take it, and I felt bad because my father said if somebody, didn't get their number and the nickel fell through, and they may come back for it. But he was that kind of honest.
So where'd you get your sense of humor?
Well, I think living in a society that needed to be made fun of.
Yeah.
I don't know. My father and mother did love to go to the movies. We didn't spend the Sunday that we didn't listen to Eddie Cantor and Jack Benny and actually Fred Allen later, but he wasn't Jewish, but it was because Jack Benny and Fred Allen had a feud. But all the comedians that were on radio, Amos and Andy at that time were the hottest thing from 1927 on. I think my father made the first radio in the neighborhood. He built his own radio. Wow. And we used to listen to Amos and Andy on 1924, 5, something like that. And humor was always at a premium. I mean, as a choice. Right. My father did like to laugh.
That's amazing. When you decided to go into show business, how did they feel about it? Did they ever forgive you?
No, they loved the idea. They
really?
They revered the actors on the screen the big movie screens who were Jewish. They made big thing out of finding another Jew who had changed his name and was now a big star. I mean, starting with Edward G. Robinson and Paul Mooney and John Garfield. And every time they'd find somebody who was Jewish, they'd say, "Oh, he's Jewish." The big one for me was to find. My father had a friend. This is a wonderful story. My father had a friend named Max Kalfas. They came from Austria together. Max Kalfas. They were Austrian Jews, and he had a young brother, Max Kalfas, called John. His name was Johann, whatever, Kalfas.
Right.
He changed his name to John Calvin, and we used to listen to the radio in 1930 something. And we used to listen to the songs of John Calvin from his native Ireland.
Oh, really?
And John Calvin, here's the song my mother taught me when I was a wee child.
Wow.
A wee lad. And a little bit of heaven fell from out the sky one day. And I would listen to this, and I was thinking as a kid, maybe I can grow up to be an Irish tenor. I figured, because he was a Jew who was masquerading as an Irish tenor, and I figured, and I loved the way John McCormick, my father loved John McCormick, the Irish tenor, the high, thin, sweet voice. But John Calvin was a Jewish Irish tenor.
When you first started doing any kind of stage acting, it was with people called Gilmore Players, right?
Yeah, that was the first time I ever acted. My brother had seen an ad in the Bronx newspaper that said WPA Dramatic Society, dramatic classes given at 100 Center Street. And he said, why don't you answer this ad? I was working in a machine shop, and that's what I wrote Enter Laughing about. It's basically all through.
Can I tell you something? Can I interrupt you? Do you know that I was in that play in high school?
Of course I knew it. Everybody knows you're in that play. And I was just you're on the World Web right now. Everybody knows you were in that play. No, I didn't know that. That's nice. Did you play David Kukulowicz?
No, I played the father.
Wonderful part. I remember that.
I didn't know. It was actually a very small part. I couldn't get anything better.
No, so anyway, that was my entree into show business. If my brother had not said to go down, and if it hadn't been for Roosevelt and the WPA project, which gave chances to kids, actors to be actors on, my first paying job was on the WPA project. It was called the NYA Radio Workshop, the National Youth Administration Workshop on WNYC in New York. And I got $22 a month to do 3 programs a week, and I thought that was exciting. So it was really funny. I owe my life to my brother and Franklin Roosevelt, the NRA, my career.
Excellent. And I guess you were paid by the Gilmore Players $1 a week, huh?
No, the Gilmore Players was a nonprofit, supposed to be a school. And they invited people to come to see it. They had a beautiful theater. One of the great theaters in Broadway theaters was 63rd Street. They tore it down, but it was a sister theater to the Court Theater. It was a beautiful 3-loge theater, 3-balcony theater.
Yeah.
The top 2 balconies were condemned because it could have fallen down. But he used to charge 44 cents for tickets, and we worked for nothing. And so for about a year, or 9 months or 8 months, I worked for nothing. But I was working as a machinist, getting $8 a week, and I couldn't afford to pay my dinner every night. I worked every night in the theater from 8 o'clock on, and at 6 o'clock I had to go to lunch, dinner, and I came to him after the 6 months or so. I said, Mr. Gilmore, I can't afford to be, work for nothing. He closed the door of his dressing room, and he says, my boy, he says, I'm going to give you $1 a week, but you must not tell anybody. If you tell anybody, I will take the $1 away. You will not have it. And every week I'd come into his dressing room on a Friday, he'd give me an envelope, and I put it in my pocket, and before I left the dressing room, he don't let anybody see this. So I got $1 a week.
Wow. That's a coincidence, because when I first started doing stand-up, actually I think my first paying job was about the same, and this was many years later.
Well, you must have been worse than I am. Mine was 1938.
Exactly.
The going rate was at least $10.
Well, see? Well, But, it's really true, I think, with any kind of performers. I know it was true with me. We kid about the starting pays. But actually, at least, in my opinion, I was getting paid for something that I would have done for nothing.
Well, I've always said that if Mephistopheles came down and said to me, would you sign this contract, you give me your soul, and I'll give you $75 a week and a job for the rest of your life on the stage in the theater, I would have signed it.
Yeah.
I would have signed. I would have sold my soul for $75. And I really meant it, too. I loved working in the theater. I loved getting on the stage and doing plays.
Yeah, it's very true. Explain to me something, okay? With your show of shows, what was it like getting up in the morning, okay, every morning, and you think, okay, geez, I think I'll go to work today. I think I'll just, sit around with Sid Caesar, Imogene Coca, Neil Simon, Howard Morris, Mel Brooks, Selma Diamond, later on Woody Allen. It's did you know at the time?
No, we knew at the time we were doing something very good. We were aware of the level of writing and the classiness of the show. Max Liebman produced a very classy, Broadway-type review every week. And we knew we were into something very special. Well, the press kept telling us we were very special, and even the Emmy Awards started giving us awards after the first couple of years. So we knew we were special. But we only treated it like a job. We were just all young people lucky to have gotten this job, and we went to work happily, most of us, because the product was laughter, and we were in a room sitting with a lot of people judging whether a joke was good or not, or throwing a suggestion into the air, even to have it rejected or accepted. It was exciting.
I mean, like at the end of the day,
these people were fun.
Did your brain hurt at the end of the day?
No, nothing hurt except that we were young. You don't hurt when you're young. We all had families to go to. We were young kids to go home to. No, there were no complaints. The only complaints was I didn't get a big enough part this week. That's about it.
When you would team up with Sid Caesar on camera, when he would do his foreign language and then you would do a foreign language, and then it would go back and forth, and how did you come up with this?
Well, that was the genesis of that is interesting. When I came on the show of shows, Sid Caesar was the quintessential, the best foreign double talker that existed ever. Nobody can do double talk in foreign language the way Sid can do. I did it in my act when I was in the Army. I did an act where I did Italian and French double talk and a little German double talk. And I knew I'd never use it on the show. On the third week of the show, remember it's a 9-year period I was with Sid. On the third week, I wanted to get a chance to do double talk, but I knew I couldn't compete with Sid. This was so great. So I came up with the idea. I said, why don't we do a foreign movie? We used to go to foreign movies once a week in New York, either seeing a French movie at the time of De Sica and Rossellini and all the great film makers, the Italian filmmakers, and the French, the Nouvelle Vague, the new great French films. And we used to see them, and I said, why don't we do a takeoff of a French film? And they said, how do you do that? And I went over to Sid, and I started selling him a pack of cigarettes, I think it was, in double talk, and he was bargaining with me. And they got the idea that by doing double talk and throwing an English word in every once in a while to push the story forward, it would work. So we did a series of going up to Japanese movies finally. But it was really a make work for myself. I was looking to get in on this thing that I could do, but not as well as Sid. And it turned out to be, a gold mine.
Who discovered you for show of shows?
Well, I was already established as an actor on Broadway. I had done a show called Call Me Mister on the road, and then in New York, when I finished the road company, I took over in New York. Julie Munchin was the original character in that show. It was a very big show, peopled with veterans of the war who came out and were actors, and we all auditioned for the show. It ran for about a year and a half or some more, and then I did another one called Inside USA, another Broadway review. And on the third Broadway review called Alive and Kicking, Max Liebman, who was now about to do the show of shows, came to look at the show, and he was going to do some doctoring on the sketch, and he saw me, and he invited me to come on the show of shows. Sid Caesar had already been on a thing called the Admiral Broadway Review, and I had seen that show, and I said, boy, that's a place I belong, never thinking I would get there. I had also done a review called the 54th Street Review in 1949, about the same time the Admiral Broadway Review was that Sid and Imogene were in, and Sid had seen me. So when Max Liebman suggested that I come and be a straight man, Sid knew who I was and was, all for it.
When I was speaking to Alan King, he described you as the greatest straight man ever.
I don't know if that's so. I am a pretty good straight man, but there have been some great straight men.
Oh, yeah, George Burns.
Well, George Burns was a great straight man, but I think the best straight man, believe it or not, I think was two of the greatest of all time was Bud Abbott. Costello. He was just so. It was like a machine, that guy. Perfect. And Dean Martin, maybe the best straight man of all, because he had to work with no net, with a guy who you never knew if he was going to be up in the air or under your feet. And he was brilliant, and he showed himself to be a brilliant actor after that.
Right.
Straight manning was a thing that I do well because I'm curious about what's in the other person's brain.
Yeah.
When I did straighted for Mel Brooks, that's my best kind of straighting, where I really play the audience wanting to find out what's in this man's brain and wanting to hear him expound on any subject that interests me.
Are you the only man alive that can keep up with him?
Oh, I no. There's who keeps up with him? I throw balls at him. There are a lot of people who, Mel is the funniest man I know. I mean, he can make me laugh almost at will.
You guys have dinner like once a week, don't you?
Sometimes more. We have to go to a movie once in a week, but he's now away I miss him. He's been gone for 2 weeks now. He's gone to New York, and I missed seeing him.
That's, the 2,000-year-old man, first of all, I want to tell you that I just finally, through Amazon.com, I got the book, The 2,000-Year-Old Man in the Year 2000. I got it this afternoon. And the little that I read of it, I was just in tears. And I have the entire collection of the complete 2,000-Year-Old Man from Reiner Records.
You had better have it.
I wouldn't be without it. As a matter of fact, my daughters, age 15 and 12, they love the discs. They can sit and listen to them over and over again.
Oh, that's cute.
And it's
what do you got? Boys, girls?
2 girls.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah, it transcends the generations. This kind of humor. That, and I got to tell you, the Dick Van Dyke Show. They can sit and watch, and I have tapes of practically every episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show.
What's your favorite? Everybody's going to pick the same favorite, I know, because they show it a lot.
Which one would you say?
I'm not going to pick any of them. They're all my favorites.
Because you know what I wanted to ask you is the character of Alan Brady. How did you make it so lovable?
Alan Brady?
Yeah. And, you may think but I'm not.
No, he's not lovable at all. But he's what every boss should be: somebody to fear a little bit, and somebody who has the power to fire you, and also an egocentric. There's never been a major star of a major show who didn't have a great ego, and I combined a few of the egos of Milton Berle, of Phil Silvers, not Jackie Gleason. It wasn't Sid. Everybody thought it was Sid because I worked with Sid, and I did this show of shows, which was the basis of the Dick Van Dyke Show, ultimately.
Really?
But I was writing it for myself when I wrote it, and I didn't get to do it.
I'll give you a perfect example of Alan Brady is the toupee episode. Do you remember this episode?
Yeah, that's the one everybody, Coast to Coast Big Mouth. Yeah, everybody loves that. That's the one I thought you'd pick out because it does play. They use it as at.
You can't dislike Alan Brady because he's reprimanding Laura and Rob, and yet you can tell that he likes them.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that has to come through. You don't really work with anybody you despise. There's no way he could have worked with people he despised. And the fact that he was vulnerable, you felt a little sorry for him because he had this guilty secret. He wore a toupee, which, by the way, I didn't have. I told everybody I wore a toupee, but Alan Brady, I figured it's funnier if a guy's vain about his hair. I was sad about losing my hair, but I wasn't vain about it. And when I wore a toupee, I always told people. As a matter of fact, I did a show called The Celebrity Game, which was a forerunner of Hollywood Squares. It was a nighttime show that I did with a lot of celebrities, from Groucho Marx to Oscar Levant to Ronald Reagan and Zsa Zsa, and I played a host on it. I hosted it for a season or two. I don't remember. The full season. And on the opening show, I came on without my hair, and I said, I don't want to put my hair on if you prefer me without it. I said, so during a commercial, I'll put my hair on, and please vote and tell me if you like me with or without hair. So on that show, I found out that people preferred me with hair, so I wore it, but everybody knew it was a toupee.
Wow. Amazing. Can I tell you how happy I am that Head of the Family never got off the ground?
Not as happy as I am, because Head of the Family was a pilot that I did, and if it had done, we wouldn't be speaking today about the Dick Van Dyke Show.
I have a copy of that episode.
No, Dick Van Dyke is one of the genius performers. In the performance field, he's a genius because he does everything that he does well. When he dances, he does slapstick, he does high comedy, low comedy, and he's the best actor who ever worked in a situation comedy. I feel very strongly about that.
Oh yeah, no, just to watch him even do the physical comedy, it's kind of like watching a ballet.
Yeah.
And to think that Johnny Carson was almost Rob Petrie.
Well, no, he wasn't almost. It was one of the two names that was suggested. Sheldon Leonard suggested Dick Van Dyke when they had to replace me. because I didn't want to fail with the same thing. He said, no, we don't want you. We want somebody who is a better you, So he suggested Dick, and I had suggested the character would be somebody like Johnny Carson, who was not a forward type of guy, but a comedian, because writers are comedians who don't want to particularly get up and one.
Right.
I thought he'd be a good choice. No, he was only suggested by myself. We never ever got to Johnny to ask him if he would care to do it. He wasn't on the Tonight Show yet. He was doing a thing called, I forget the name.
Yeah.
An afternoon show.
But Dick Van Dyke wasn't that well known at the time, was he? I mean, to be, all of a sudden thrown onto a show called The Dick Van Dyke Show.
He had done 13 pilots that didn't sell, but I didn't know him from those pilots. I knew him because he was on Broadway with a show called Bye Bye Birdie.
Uh-huh.
I knew of Dick, but I didn't. He had a lot of careers before he came to us. He had worked on early morning radio, doing the news with Cronkite. He had done the television. He had done an early radio show from the South, and he had done a lot of pilots that didn't work. But he was extraordinarily good in Bye Bye Birdie.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I realized that's our guy.
And you decided to call it The Dick Van Dyke Show.
Well, I decided to call it that. It was based on the fact that a lot of shows, game shows, were saying, there's so-and-so, the Jeopardy, whatever the name of this, well, even today, they'll say The Wheel of Fortune starring, hey, here are your stars, Pat Sajak and Vanna White. And I said, they're not really stars, they're hosts,
Right.
But the word star. And I felt that Dick Van Dyke was a potential star, and nobody knew him. And I remember Danny Thomas, who put up the money for the show, and Sheldon Leonard said, gee, should we call it the Dick Van Dyke Show? We don't call it the Danny Thomas Show, and he was already a movie star and a nightclub comedian star.
Right.
And I said, they call it Make Room for Daddy. I said,
right.
Well, he produced his own show. He probably felt embarrassed about calling it the Danny Thomas Show. He should have. And I said, I fought very hard. I said, let's call it the Dick Van Dyke Show so people will know who that man is.
Uh-huh.
I said, once you get the name out there, they'll say, instead of asking the question, who's the guy who plays Rob Petrie? Let's call it that name and say Dick Van Dyke is the guy who plays Rob Petrie. No, I insisted on that, and then they agreed with me. There wasn't much of a fight, but I said, let's make him a star. He is a star. He's brilliant.
I've heard the Dick Van Dyke Show called the Jewish comedy starring a Gentile.
Yeah. Well, let's face it, the Judeo-Christian ethic is pretty much the same. We all have the same Ten Commandments.
Right.
And all I did was write, when I wrote for myself, I didn't write it particularly Jewish, but I am Jewish, and when I wrote it for myself, I didn't say he wasn't Jewish. But you go along with Jack Benny and George Burns, we knew they were Jewish, but they didn't. I mean, Benny Kubelski changed his name to Jack Benny,
right.
And Burns changed his name from, I forgot what his name, Birnbaum.
Right.
And so we knew they were Jewish, but they were assimilated into an American culture. So when I wrote for Dick Van Dyke, I wrote exactly as if I were writing the same ethics for myself, and he overlaid his wonderful personality and his background, but the writing remained the same. It's just I'll tell you a funny one is that producer of the Andy Griffith Show, which was another one of Sheldon Leonard's and Danny Thomas's throw-off series,
right.
Spin-offs, was produced by a guy named Aaron Rubin, who spoke perfect Yiddish, and his father was very Yiddish and spoke Yiddish a lot. And Aaron Rubin used to use his father's little aphorisms and translate them into English. And Andy Griffith would be saying them, and they were translations of Yiddishkeit. He would say, like, geh nicht raus mit dein linker Fuß. Don't go out with your left foot.
Yeah.
You step out the door with your right foot forward. And that was Andy saying that when you go out the door, you put your right foot out. That wasn't a Southern saying. That was an old Jewish European saying. Wow. But there was a lot of them that crept into it.
Carl, I read somewhere that Where's Papa lost money?
Oh, yeah. Where's Papa never made its money back.
That's
Where's
incredible.
Papa was made for $1,032,000, and I think we're still $65,000 in arrears or something.
Wow.
It wasn't accepted by the general populace, but it did become a cult. I got a couple of those cult movies.
I was a little kid.
It didn't make money, but we love it.
My mother brought me to that movie, and as a little kid, I thought that it was brilliant. How could that have lost money?
Oh, it didn't catch on. It was 1968 or 9.
Right.
And it didn't catch on with the populace.
That's amazing.
You know, the UA, United Artists, who, when they saw the the finished cut, they thought it was the best movie they ever had. They took it to the NATO convention, which is the National Association of Theater Owners in Florida, where they usually show a little product reel, 10 minutes of whatever new movie's coming out, and they decided to show the whole movie because they were so proud of it. They thought they had the biggest hit in the world. Well, by the time the middle of the picture was coming on the screen, half the audience left. What they're talking about? What the hell? The guys brought their wives there, and they heard fuck, and they heard words that they never heard before. And my son said the 7-letter word that had never been in the movie before.
Right.
So that was a little ahead of its time, I think.
Unbelievable. However, you did write one of the funniest movies that has ever been written, The Jerk.
Yeah, that was, I think, the most successful movie I've ever been involved with, money-wise, in the box office. I think Oh God, too, had an equal amount of...
Yeah. I have never been to a movie theater, and when The Jerk first came out, I'd never been to a movie theater where you always hear the term laughing in the aisles. People were laughing in the aisles.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think they were. I've had a couple of moments like that in my life.
Just unbelievable. Now, you have a new book out.
Yes, I do, a book of short stories.
How Paul Robeson Saved My Life, Other Mostly Happy Stories.
Mostly happy and other mostly happy stories. Yes, that's my favorite thing right now because it's the current thing in my life. And I love writing short stories. I love the fact that my attention span is about what America's is. I love to read beginning, middle, and ends, and it shouldn't take me 14 days to read it. No, I get very frustrated when I read about a wonderful book, and as a matter of fact, my kids for Hanukkah and Christmas, whatever you want to call it, for both, they gave me some wonderful books to read, and they're long books, and I'm going to read them. One of them is The Life of Luther Adler, the great Jewish actor.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't wait to read it. But I'm always happy when somebody hands me a book with short stories in it that are... So again, you go to the bathroom, you can read it all. I got short stories for any problems you have. I mean, if you go to the bathroom and you've eaten something binding that day, I have an 8-page or a 12-page short story.
Oh, good.
If you're just going to be there for a minute, I have a 1-page short story. I have a 2-page, 4-page, 8-page. I have 25 short stories of varying lengths.
Yeah, that's
more
nice.
Than 12 pages.
Now, in your book, is Corporal Reiner really Corporal Reiner?
Oh, that's the only autobiographical thing in the whole book, and it's exactly, I think it's almost verbatim, my memory of what happened in 1944 when I was accosted by a bigot. We were a non-integrated army in those days. Somebody didn't notice that in the Constitution it says all men are created equal in the Bill of Rights. They didn't notice that. And so those days, the Army wasn't integrated until Truman said, hey, we better pay attention and integrate the Army. But in those days, the only place blacks and whites were together was in the non-commissioned officer school, and this was Camp Crowder, Missouri. And I found myself in a latrine talking to a big black guy who was a very well-educated, charming guy. And there was a bigot watching us having this social intercourse, seeing two people of different races standing shoulder to shoulder urinating for their country. He didn't like that. So he accosted me on the way out, and he said, you don't mind that there's, and he used the N-word, niggers in those barracks.
Yeah.
And that started a colloquy and a debate. He said, you think that a black man is as good as a white man?
Wow.
Well, it might be one. This guy's better than both of us. I said, he's college educated, and he can beat the hell out of both of us. And he said, you think there's a white man and a black man in this world as good as me? And I said, oh, there must be some. He says, name one. And I said, Paul Robeson, who was at that time the quintessential civil rights warrior in the world.
Right.
And so we got into a debate. You tell me what he did, I'll tell you what I did. Was he was a better man? And I said, well, he's a college graduate and Phi Beta Kappa from Rutgers. I never went to college. I was 1-1, and we had a debate. I told him what Paul Robeson did, and he told me what he did. And it ended up at nighttime where I had the the barracks laughing a lot because he was saying stupid things like, I said, Paul Robeson just wrote a book of autobiographies. I never read a book. He may surprise you. It doesn't surprise me. 1-1, 2-2. Okay, we got 2-2. And it went like that where the guys were laughing, and that's how he saved my life, because at the end of the evening, I mean, after lights out, I heard this voice come across the barracks saying, Reiner, you a Jew? And he said, you want to step outside with carbines and settle this? What are you talking about? As you won the debate, why should we step out? Well, settle this once for all. I said, no, I'm a crack shot. I'll kill you, and then I'll have to spend the rest of my life in the brig, in jail. So that was the scariest thing in the world. He was seriously thinking we should settle this by shooting at each other. And by the fact that the guys were laughing at what I said made it possible for me to not get killed
That's
or
wild.
lynched.